The hammer struck without warning. A blunt crack split the dawn air of the hangar. Metal collided with bone, a sound too heavy to be accidental. Lieutenant Mara Voss staggered, the world tilting, her ears ringing like a flare igniting just inches away. The floor was cold and slick beneath her hands, oil mixing with blood into a dark, reflective pool. In the haze of her vision, boots shifted. The men who had struck her froze, disbelief etched into their posture. She was supposed to collapse, she was supposed to be broken, but she didn't. Slowly, deliberately, she pushed herself up, her eyes locking on the one still gripping the hammer. Silence hung in the air, thick and heavy, as if the room itself was holding its breath. A thin red line along her temple caught the flicker of the hangar lights, sweat tracing its path like molten metal. The room seemed uncertain whether it was witnessing a failure of physics or the birth of something else entirely. Before we get to the debrief months later, hit that like button and comment where you're watching from, because after this mission, no one in her unit would ever dare to underestimate her again. This is the moment theory becomes reality, when you see what cannot be broken, even under relentless pressure. If you've ever stood when you weren't meant to, you know what comes next. The first thing Mara noticed wasn't the blood, but the metallic tang in the air, the rust on the old pipes, the oil lingering on the concrete, the sharp, cold edge of steel. She pressed a piece of gauze to her scalp, feeling the sting bloom across her skin. She didn't flinch. The mirror above the rusty sink reflected a slight tremor in her fingers, but she focused on the tape, the angle, the pressure. Control wasn't a word. It was a muscle she had trained for years. Boots echoed in the hall outside. Voices, low and sharp, a laugh, a whisper. Then the heavy door slammed behind them, leaving her alone with the hiss of the vents. She rinsed her hands, watching the red swirl into the clear water and disappear down the drain. Protocol demanded she report it immediately, but instinct whispered otherwise. This wasn't an accident. It was a test, wrapped in cowardice. She had seen the signs for weeks, the sidelong glances during briefings, the subtle delays in orders, the smirks that were quickly hidden. Men who mistook silence for weakness always did. She said nothing, but she logged everything. Who spoke to whom? Which conversations stopped the moment she entered a room? Command didn't intervene, preferring the illusion of order over messy confrontation. Isolation became her new routine. She was reassigned to tedious logistics briefings. Her access codes were suddenly under review. The very men who had trained beside her now avoided eye contact. Every single day became an exercise in observation, tracking behaviors, the subtle rotations of power, and the small betrayals that reveal true loyalty. She stayed silent. But beneath that silence, a cold calculation had begun. The gym at night was her sanctuary, empty, smelling of iron and chalk dust, with shadows lingering among the weight racks. Mara wrapped her hands with deliberate precision, ignoring the sting of the gauze hidden beneath her hairline. Pain was just feedback. It meant the system was still alive. Movement replaced the noise in her head. Deadlifts, presses, controlled breaths. The clang of heavy plates echoed off the walls, each repetition stripping away the day's chaos and confusion. Between sets, she'd stare at her reflection in the dim red glow of the emergency lights and think to herself, "Steel only breaks when it's cold, so I'll stay burning." These weren't words of defiance, but simple instruction. By the time she left, exhaustion shook her body, but her focus was absolute. The mission brief was clean, professional. Covert extraction, simulated hostiles, a derelict shipyard at 0200. Nothing unusual on paper, but a quiet tension threaded through every name on the roster. Rhodes, one of the men from the hangar, had positioned himself as communications lead, the perfect place for sabotage. She read the plan once, then twice, noting his subtle manipulation of the grid coordinates, and she let him believe she walked in blind. By the docks, a thick fog muted all sound. Rusted cranes loomed like silent, skeletal giants against the night sky. Every footstep on the steel catwalk echoed too loudly. Every radio click carried a trace of static, a slight delay. "Bravo, unit. Proceed to Sector 4. Rhodes' voice came through, laced with static. Voss had already mapped the true grid in her mind. His Sector 4 was off by nearly 100 meters, a trap, disguised as confusion. She switched her comms to an analog frequency, using hand patterns and old codes her team would remember instinctively from their early training. Shadows moved in perfect rhythm with her silent commands. Within minutes, they breached the lower deck, neutralized the simulated targets, and secured the hostage with surgical precision. Rhodes' voice returned, laced with frustration. "Voss, you broke protocol," he said, the anger barely contained. She keyed her mic, her voice calm and even. "No, I corrected it." Command declared it a textbook operation, a flawless success. Rhodes knew the truth, but she filed no report, maintained her silence, timing her actions with the precision of a master watchmaker. The debrief room was cold, the fluorescent lights harsh and unforgiving. Voss sat upright, hands folded neatly on the table. Rhodes leaned in, his voice measured, attempting to bait her into an emotional response. Instead of speaking, she slid a small data drive across the table. "Footage from Unit Cam 2, she said, her voice steady. The operations officer watched as misaligned coordinates and altered timestamps exposed every one of Rhodes' errors. A heavy silence filled the room. Voss didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the frayed American flag patch on her sleeve, a symbol of loyalty, of principle. When the session ended, nothing more was said. Rhodes disappeared within 48 hours, quietly reassigned to a desk job on the other side of the world. The others from that morning in the hangar either averted their eyes or met her gaze for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of something unspoken. Voss didn't comment. Her routine continued. Dawn runs, maintenance checks, silent drills. Her focus had no edges. Once, a young recruit, new to the unit, asked her about the rumors, about the hammer incident. Voss paused, then looked at the young soldier and said quietly, "Steel doesn't remember the hammer. It only remembers the forge." The words spread through the ranks, a whisper of warning and of respect. Later, a journalist interviewed her in a small office near the docks. The air smelled of salt and diesel. No bright lights, no PR team, just her and the camera. The questions were about leadership, betrayal, and resilience. But she didn't speak of incidents or names. She spoke of metallurgy, of how steel is forged strong through intense heat and constant repetition. Footage of her training runs, with ocean spray hitting the lens and the glint of gunmetal in the sun, played over her calm, steady voice. No commentary was needed. The hangar smelled the same as it always had. The low hum of generators, dust motes dancing in the morning light. Mara paused at a small, almost imperceptible dent in the concrete floor, where steel had once struck bone. She traced the mark with her fingers. She didn't smile or frown. She simply aligned her insignia tag on the bench where she had bandaged herself all those months ago. Dawn spilled over the floor, over the scar, over the tag. She stepped forward without looking back, her footsteps fading into the light and the quiet hum of machinery. They tried to break her skull. They forgot. The body bends, but the code endures. True steel remembers only the fire that forged it. Lieutenant Mara Voss didn't seek redemption or revenge. She simply endured, she refined, and she returned sharper. Strength isn't just about surviving the blow. It's about understanding why it fell and standing up anyway.